We just hit 10,000 subscribers. It might not seem like a big number for a lot of people, but this really means the world to me. So thank you guys. Every single one of you. I am really happy to have you around. We actually hit 10K the night before the first year anniversary of the channel, which I think it's very poetic. And if you just found my channel and you're new here, hello, my name is Caroline and I make sewing tutorials and sewing patterns to help you along your sewing journey. Which takes us to today's video. I wanted to do something special to celebrate hitting 10K. I already had this planned for a little while now. It's something that I really like to do, to release free patterns on channel milestones, because I know there are lots of people out there who are just starting out on their sewing journey and pattern making might seem a little bit overwhelming. A good thing for them though is that it's actually one of my favorite things to do. So I developed a free pattern for this really easy and adorable dress. It's really not that difficult to make. So even if you're a beginner, I think you can make this with no problem because I'm going to explain every single step. And this style is actually quite customizable. I'll be making mine with a midi-length skirt with 2 gather tiers, and that's how the pattern comes, but you can make yours shorter if you want, without any tiers, or make the tiers with different sizes. There is a world of possibilities here. And as always, you can find all the materials that you need for this project in the link in the description. Before we start sewing, I would like to take a moment and thank every single one of you who have purchased a pattern from my shop. You guys are basically the reason why I've been able to keep this channel up for the entire year, and also the reason why I can keep making and releasing so many free patterns. If it wasn't for you, I really wouldn't be able to make it, so thank you, for real. And I really hope you guys enjoyed today's tutorial. Now let's go sew it. When you're choosing your size, you mainly have to pay attention to your bust measurement, and the style of the pattern is also a little bit loose, so there's ease around, and it goes from sizes extra small to 4L. But if your measurements are not contemplated by this and you think you're not going to fit, please get in contact with me so I can expand the sizing even more. I want to be as inclusive as I can. I don't want anyone feeling left out. And I'm also in the process of expanding the sizing chart for all the patterns that I have already released. So if you're a plus size or petite person and you would like to help me out by receiving the pattern for free to test it and give me feedback on what you think, I'll leave a form in the description for you to fill with the pattern that is currently being expanded. This is the fabric I'll be using today. It's a really cute cotton and I love this print. And I'm going to cut the bodice and the sleeves first because the skirt panels are basically just rectangles. And just so you know, the skirt doesn't have actual pattern pieces for you to print because, as I said, they're just rectangles. So to avoid wasting paper, I wrote down all of the dimensions of all of the tiers for all of the sizes. And you can find that in the PDF instructions. There is a cutting guide on the pattern, but make sure you're placing the front on the fold, and the back doesn't have to be placed on the fold because we're going to sew this together for the keyhole effect in the back. And if your fabric is checkered like mine, make sure to align the bottom of both pieces so the sides match later. Now I'm just going to measure to cut the rectangles. I am making mine a little bit longer than the measurements that I put in the PDF instructions because I am really tall. So if I made the same measurements for me as it was there, then for most people, it would just be too long. But my first tier will be 55 centimeters long. And it was a personal choice, but for the back ties, I decided to cut mine on a bias. Cutting on the bias gives it a little bit of stretch, and it also makes it easier to turn it right sides out, but you don't have to cut it on the bias if you don't want to. The first step that we have to take is to transfer the darts to the fabric on both sides. You can also use an erasable pen. They're easier to see, but mine just ran out of ink, so I'm gonna use the chalk, even though it's such a light color. If your fabric is really slippery, be careful when you're transferring it to the other side. You can also make 2 very small cuts, like this, like very small. Never cross the seam allowance. My fabric doesn't really have a right or a wrong side, but you should make sure to do this at the wrong side of the fabric. Now you place them right sides together, fold it, and now we're going to sew the darts closed on both sides. My last needle broke and I forgot to change. Okay, now we're good. Just manually tie a knot. Now we're going to sew the back panels right sides together here. Don't sew here. only here. I also finished it with an overlocker. Now we're going to place the front right sides together at the back and sew it at the shoulders. You can leave it aside for now because we're going to prepare the facing. Start by sewing it here, the same place that we sewed the back. And I also think it's better for you to finish all the edges before sewing them to each other. So I'm going to serge the top and the bottom of the front and the back. If you don't have a serger, you can use a zigzag stitch all around. And now we're going to place them right sides together and sew it at the shoulder like we did for the bodice. And before we sew the facing to the bodice, we have to have the little straps that we're going to tie. So just fold it right sides together and sew it 1 centimeter away from the edge, or less if you want, to make them thinner. Now you trim it close to the stitch. And with the help of a loop turner, I'm going to turn it right sides out. Now take the bodice with the right sides facing up, mark 1 centimeter from the top, and place the strap. And now you just need to place the facing on top of it, right sides together. So this part is the front, it's going to be here, and this part with the keyhole detail is the back, and I'm going to place it here. And now I'll do the same thing to the back. And now we just have to sew it all around with 1 centimeter away from the edge. Now with the needle down, I'm going to pivot and turn it around and sew it again. And before turning it right sides out, we have to trim all of the edges. Be careful not to cut too close to the stitching. And you also need to do the same thing here. And you also need to make small curves all around the curve. Now you need to top stitch it all around in the front and the back to secure the facing in place. Your sleeve pattern is going to come with a mark indicating where the front of the sleeve is. And I think it's very important for you to transfer it to the fabric so you don't get confused later. So now it's time to run 2 basting stitches at the top of the sleeve. And the basting stitch is a very long stitch, the longest your machine has. In my case, is 4. And it's a stitch that we're going to remove later, so you don't have to backstitch in the beginning or the end. Now we pick up one of the threads from each one of the stitchings that we made. Now we take the threads from the top and we use our fingers to pull the fabric so it gathers like this. Make sure to concentrate the gathers at the top part of the sleeve. Leave those edges right here without gathering. And you have to gather it until it has the same width as the armhole opening, like this. And then you pin it to the armhole opening. The right sides have to be facing each other. And now you sew here 1 centimeter away from the edge. I added both sleeves and I also finished it with an overlocker, but you can finish it with a zigzag stitch. This is how we left off, gathering it and sewing it here while it's still open. So now what we have to do is take the front and the back and place the right sides together like this. Match the seam of the sleeve here, from the hem of the sleeve all the way to the waist of the dress. And make sure the dart of the bust is facing down, like this. So the skirt is a gathered skirt, which is very simple to make. I chose to make mine with 2 tiers, but if you prefer, you can just make it with 1. So for the second tier, there are 2 rectangles of fabric that I had to cut. So before gathering it and sewing it to the first tier, we're gonna have to sew them right sides together. And then we just need to sew 2 basting stitches at the top. And I'll also lower the tension so it's easier for me to gather. And you're not supposed to backstitch in the beginning or at the end of sewing. So here's the first tier of the skirt. As you can see, I divided it into 4 equal parts. So 1 part, 2 parts, this is red in the middle, 3 parts and 4 parts, but it doesn't fit my table. And I did the same thing to the second tier here. And now we have to do the exact same thing that we did for the sleeves. We separate the threads from the gathering stitch, and now we pull it and gather the lower layer until it's the same width as the top. It's not difficult, but it takes a little bit of time. And now that both tiers have the same width, I try to be very even throughout the entire thing. I'm going to place them right sides together and sew. And now you have to do the same thing to the top of the first tier that we did with the second one, but this time you have to make each one of the 4 parts have the same width as each one of the 4 parts of the bodice. So the back seam until the side seam, and I also divided the front in the middle. And now I have to gather all of this and sew it right sides together with the top. And I left a little bit of the side of the skirt without sewing to the bodice. Sew the skirt from top to bottom later and close it. So what did you guys think of the dress? I really hope you guys like this gift. I made this pattern with a lot of love to celebrate the 10,000 and the first year anniversary of the channel. It actually took a long time to make. This video was supposed to be uploaded 2 weeks ago, but it took me longer than I expected to finish the pattern and to get the video edited. So we're actually closer to 15K now. So once again, thank you guys. And this is the first pattern that I'm releasing with my extended sizing chart. So please let me know if you found any fit issues with the pattern. There will be a form linked in the description for you to fill if that's the case. And if you end up making the Becca dress, please tag me on Instagram so I can see your versions of it. And before I go, to celebrate the first year of the channel, I'll also be making my first ever giveaway. And to participate, you can go to the last post on my Instagram account. The link will be in the description. You'll be able to find all the rules there, but I'll choose 5 subscribers to win. And each one of the winners will be able to choose a pattern of mine from my shop, whichever one you want. So head to my Instagram so you don't miss it. It will be open for the next 4 days after the release of this video. I wish you all good luck, and I hope to see you guys around next time as well. Bye!